Momo is standing outside the school gate one morning with her new boyfriend, and she is extremely disappointed when the first thing he does is start asking her to lend him some money. The guy then immediately asks to smash, and that's when Momo has had enough and decides to call off their date with a roundhouse kick, but she kinda sucks at martial arts, so the boyfriend says he's done with this and knocks her to the ground. A while later, Momo's friends are trying to comfort her, but what was she expecting to happen when she found the guy off Craigslist? They ask her what she could have possibly seen in a guy like that, but the only reason Momo liked him was because she is in love with her idol Ken Takakura, and that guy looks similar to him. So she thought it would be good enough. Later on, Momo is walking through the halls while being depressed that she will never get to date a guy like Ken, and as she walks, she notices a guy in the class next to her that is getting bullied relentlessly. They've been throwing paper balls so far, but now they really want to hurt him. So they are about to start throwing magnets, but Momo gets in their way and takes a seat next to the kid to make them stop. The bullies don't want to mess with her, so they turn away, and as soon as they have lost interest, Momo gets up to walk away and continue her depressed walk through the halls. However, midway through she gets stopped by the boys she just helped, and he asks her if she's in love. He can only think of one reason why a girl like her would talk with an absolute weirdo like him, and Momo tries to deny having any feelings for him. But that's not what Okarun is talking about. He thinks she is an occult fanatic just like him and shows her this magazine with all sorts of information about how aliens are real, birds are government drones, and the world is getting ready for a space war. Momo isn't interested and tries to walk away, but Okarun keeps trying to get her attention until she eventually snaps and roasts every aspect of his existence from his mop head to his industrial strength glasses and his weird hobby. She then tells him to never speak to her again, but before she leaves, she realizes she may have been a little too harsh with him. So she walks back and tries to indulge Okarun by telling him she believes ghosts are real. She was just trying to be relatable, but Okarun immediately starts making fun of her for it, because he doesn't believe for a second that ghosts are actually real. She's pissed that he would mock her when he believes in the same stuff, but Okarun corrects her and says he believes in aliens from outer space and other weird stuff, but believing in ghosts is just silly. Momo tries to convince him by saying her grandma is a spirit medium and she has seen an exorcism firsthand, but Okarun still doesn't buy it. They spend a few more minutes arguing, and at one point Momo's friends come down the stairs and they think it's cute how she's getting along with him. To settle their argument, Momo and Okarun decide to make a bet where Momo swears she will prove the existence of ghosts and Okarun swears to prove the existence of aliens. Later that night, Momo walks into an old abandoned hospital, and she's getting really creeped out by it, but according to Okarun, this place is a prime location for UFO sightings and she'll probably get abducted. Abduction means she will be kidnapped and probed by aliens, but Okarun has never actually experienced it himself. Meanwhile, on Okarun's end, he is following Momo's instructions and is headed for an old abandoned tunnel, and he's totally freaking out, and Momo tells him that he's basically guaranteed to be attacked by a ghost if he goes in. But he still insists that ghosts aren't real, so he goes in anyway. Momo tells him to keep his voice down because according to her internet sources, yelling will only make the ghosts angrier, and Okarun follows her advice, but he can't help but notice that she keeps referring to internet sources, so he asks if she has ever actually seen a ghost in person. Momo plainly tells him she hasn't, and Okarun blows up about it because she is doing the exact thing she complained about a minute ago. He asks how she can have so much faith that ghosts exist when she has no proof of it, but just because she hasn't seen one doesn't mean there's no proof. As she mentioned earlier, her grandma is a spirit medium, and Momo has been living with her ever since she was a child because she doesn't have parents. Okarun goes silent for a bit, but Momo tells him there's no need to be so serious about it. Her family has always been really weird. For example, when she was a kid, her grandma would make her wear a charm bag and do a silly pose whenever she walked to school, and naturally, the kids in her class all made fun of her for it. But what really stung was when the boy Momo had a crush on at the time made fun of her as well. She started to resent her grandma after that and thought a bunch of terrible things about her, and recently, she hadn't spoken to her at all. But Momo would still get upset whenever someone said bad things about her grandma, and that made her realize that she wasn't angry about the kids making fun of her. She was angry because they were all making fun of her grandma. She still loves her grandma more than anything, and she even likes how her grandma is a spirit medium because it makes her feel special. She believes in her grandma, and since her grandma says ghosts are real, Momo believes that ghosts are real. Now that Momo has given her reason, she wants to know why Okarun believes in aliens, but Okarun dodges the question and says he doesn't have a special reason to like this stuff, and Momo can't really argue with that. She tells Okarun that he's a lot more confident when he talks on the phone, and likewise, Okarun tells her she is really easy to talk to. Just then, Okarun turns around and to his horror, he sees an old lady ghost asking to gobble his schlong. I guarantee someone out there is down bad enough to accept, but that person is an Okarun, so he turns and begins making a run for it. Momo tries calming him down and says that the last thing he should do in this situation is run, because if Turbo Granny catches up to him, he's going to get cursed and she's going to diddle him. Momo's call with Okarun cuts off and she knows something must have happened to him. So she's about to head over to the tunnel so she can rescue him. However, before she can leave, she notices 3 figures standing in the hallway and she definitely knows that ain't good. So she tries to run, but she's immediately captured. A while later, she wakes up and finds herself strapped down in an alien chair. The aliens tell her that there's no need to be afraid of them, but that's kind of hard to believe when they kidnapped her and shredded all her clothes. She demands to be released immediately, but the aliens ignore her and begin explaining their plans. You see, their species only has males in it, so they reproduce through cloning technology. However, that has made them more inbred than a Spanish royal family. So they will be using her body to conduct research on human reproduction, and they're all out of baby oil. Momo refuses to let this happen, but the aliens begin using mind control to stop her from resisting. Just then, Momo's phone begins ringing and one of the aliens is curious, so it goes over to investigate, and as a result, it gets stomped in the face. An arm then pops out of the phone, followed by the rest of the Okarun who's under the Turbo Granny curse, and the first thing he does is to bite off one of the alien swans. The alien gets sent flying and Okarun begins apologizing to Momo because he was clearly wrong about ghosts and got himself cursed. Momo would like to say I told you so, but first, she needs him to get her out of here. The aliens are confused and wonder what kind of technology allowed Okarun to get into their spaceship through a phone, but he isn't the one they are probing, so they don't want him here. Okarun is trying to keep it together, but the curse soon takes hold of him again, and he now wants to gobble their swans. The aliens say they are the only ones allowed to do inappropriate things like that, so they take off their skin suits and prepare to fight with telekinesis. But Okarun is too fast for them to keep track of, so he closes the distance and gets in front of one of the aliens before suplexing it by its junk. He then goes after the next ones, but this time, since he is running a straight line, the alien is able to blast him into a wall. The alien is extremely offended that Okarun would dare chomp on his alien brethren's bananas. But it doesn't want to waste any more time, so it turns to continue probing Momo. Okarun yells for it to stop and says if it wants to probe someone, it should be in. He's never had any friends when he was a kid. He thought aliens may be willing to be friends with him. And that's why he began studying the occult and would stand on the roof for hours in hopes of contacting aliens. However, no aliens ever showed up for him, and that made him believe even aliens thought he was a loser. The people around him would constantly bully him just for the sake of it, but Momo was the first person to stand up for him, and no matter what, he's not going to let her get hurt, even if he has to turn into a monster to do it. He is harnessing the power of the Turbo Granny, but the alien is smart enough to see what he's trying to do, so it quickly double taps Okarun to keep him down. After that, the alien gets back to probing Momo, and there's nothing she can do to fight it. But she suddenly has a flashback to the time her grandma was trying to teach her about chi, and how she was too embarrassed to try it back then and ran off while calling her grandma a fake spirit being. She would like to apologize to her grandma for her outburst back then, but at this point, she has nothing to lose, so she tries performing the technique, and to her surprise, it actually works. She blows herself out of her restraints, and Okarun can hardly believe that Momo is a real psychic. She had no idea she could do this, and the alien's telekinesis is no longer effective on her, so with her new power, she roundhouse kicks the alien so hard that it is sent flying out of the ship. Momo thinks she would do that much damage, but the spaceship is going down now, so she starts looking around for Okarun so they can get out of here. However, Okarun has been taken over by Turbo Granny once more, and he tries attacking Momo, but Momo uses her arm to block his bite, and then uses her powers to dispel Turbo Granny's curse. At first, it looks like she was successful since Turbo Granny is now to Okarun's body, but the curse isn't broken because Turbo Granny still has Okarun's squalms, and if he wants it back, he's going to have to come take it from her in her tunnel. Turbo Granny then vanishes, leaving Momo and Okarun on the alien spaceship, which is about to go down. A ship crashes through the abandoned hospital and into the street, but remarkably, Momo and Okarun are still unharmed as Momo kicks a hole out of the spaceship. Momo and Okarun regret everything about this night, but Momo now definitely believes in aliens and Okarun definitely believes in ghosts. With that said, they have no idea what they are going to do now since Okaru's curse causes him to go out of control as soon as Momo stops using her powers on him, and Momo lost all of her stuff when the aliens abducted her. The only way for Okaru to undo his curse is to defeat Turbo Granny, so he gets up and says he is heading over to the tunnel so he can do that. At the same time, he starts taking off his clothes and tells Momo she can wear them to go home. Momo tries to stop him because he will lose control if she isn't around, but Okaru doesn't want to get her involved since he blames himself for how things turned out. He doesn't really have a plan to defeat Turbo Granny by himself, but he's sure he will figure it out somehow. Momo has no intention of letting him go alone after everything they just went through, and she reminds him that the only reason they made it out of the spaceship was because of her powers, so he'd be dead meat without her. Okaru asks her if she is sure she wants to risk herself to help someone like him, but Momo has already made up her mind, so she walks over to Okaru and tells him to put his clothes back on. However, Okaru tells her to keep his clothes because he is way too embarrassed to talk to her like this. For a second, Momo's heart skipped a beat because Okaru happened to say the exact phrase Takakura Ken usually says, but she tries to brush it off. She has been calling him Okaru this entire time, but she doesn't actually know his name, so she asks, and to her utter shock, Okaru's real name is Takakura Ken. Momo refuses to accept that he has the same name as her idol, so she starts freaking out and spazzing on the ground, but because she lost focus for a second, Turbo Granny begins taking over his body, so Momo frantically slams him into the wall with her powers to get him back to normal. If they are going to deal with this together, Momo tells him that he's not allowed to use his name around her, otherwise she won't be able to focus. For now, she decides to just keep calling him Okaru, so they begin the long walk to Momo's house. Before long, the sun rises, and according to Momo, Turbo Granny can't come out anymore because of the sunlight, probably. In any case, they should be safe for now, so Momo invites Okaru to come to rest at her grandma's house right now. Once they arrive, Okaru tries to walk through the front gate, but he fails the vibe check. So he bursts into flames and Momo is forced to use her powers to drag him into a nearby pond. Momo realizes this must have been caused by the talisman her grandma put up to ward off evil, and she probably should have warned Okaru about it since he is currently cursed, but everything should be fine now that she has taken the talisman off the post. Okaru is hesitant to go in this time, but luckily, nothing bad happens, and aside from mop head hair, Okaru is perfectly fine. Momo leads him into the house and starts calling out for her grandma, but it looks like she isn't home right now, so Momo tells Okaru he can head on up to her room with her. Before he comes in, she wants to change her clothes, so she asks him to close the door and give her some privacy, but as soon as he does, the curse starts acting up again. So he barges back in while Momo is changing and she gets embarrassed, so she slams him against the wall. It's frustrating that she can't leave Okaru's side, so she tells him to just stand there and avoid eye contact while she changes. When she's done, she gives Okaru a pair of sweats that should fit him, and while they have time to chat, she starts asking the real questions, like if Okaru still has his willy on him or not. Okaru hadn't even thought about it, but Turbo Granny did say she took his dom as part of her curse, so Momo wants to see what it looks like to literally have no balls. Just to make sure, Okaru checks himself, and to his horror, he really is winnerless. After seeing how he reacted, Momo wants to see it even more, but even if there's nothing there, Okaru still needs to preserve his dignity, so he tells her to back off. He blames Momo for his lack of balls because she was the one who dared him to go into that tunnel with Turbo Granny, but to be fair, Momo also nearly got probed by aliens, and Okaru was the one who started talking to her about occult stuff in the first place. He admits that he did start it, but he just didn't want to miss his chance to make a friend since she was the first person to show him kindness. But in the end, it looks like he just made trouble for her, so he promises that once this is over, he will never talk to her again and she can go back to ignoring him. Momo tells him she never said she didn't like talking to him, and sure, at first she may have thought he was annoying, but after getting to know him, he's a lot more fun than she originally thought, so she would love to continue talking about occult stuff with him. Okaru starts getting all emotional and silent, so Momo begins pestering him to say something to break the silence, but Okaru decides to break the silence by calling her ugly, so the two start fighting again. Just then, their fight is interrupted when the doorbell starts ringing, but while Okaru thinks Momo's grandma must be back, Momo figures out that something else is going on because that's not the usual doorbell sound. Years ago, her grandma had warned her that her house had two different doorbells. One was for normal people, and the other only reacted to evil spirits. And as she says this, she remembers that she removed the talisman that protected the house from evil, so whatever's outside that door is most certainly not good. Olkarun asks what they are going to do, so Momo grabs the talisman and says they'll just leave the door closed and sneak out the back to place the talisman back on the post. That way the eel spirit be burnt to a crisp, but Olkarun's going to have to stand outside the gate so he doesn't get burnt as well. As they exit the back door, Momo looks around the corner to see if she can spot the evil spirit, but she can't see it anymore for some reason. Olkarun gets her attention and points to the sky, which is ominously getting dark, and in the next moment, a giant wall is formed around the entire compound. Now there's no way for them to escape, so Momo thinks the only option remaining is to attach the talisman to the gate to get rid of the monster. But Olkarun tells her to wait since he can't get to the other side of the gate, so if she does it now, he's going to die. Momo starts trying to think of an alternative plan, but then she notices some red stuff on the talisman, and it looks like shoe bleeding from her nose. Although that's nothing compared to what Olkarun is going through, as he is freaking out over the rapid blood loss. Momo looks around, and the cause of the sudden bleeding must be all the black fog that appeared in the compound. And speaking of things that appeared in the compound, Momo looks up and spots this big-ass thing staring at her. The spirit calls them evil and throws a punch at the two of them, but they are able to jump out of the way, so the punch misses and forms a crater in the wall. Momo and Olkarun take one look at each other after what just happened and decide to start running away, but the monster jumps down from the ceiling and swipes at the two of them, knocking them into some windows with the sheer wind force. Momo drives Olkarun so they can keep moving, but the sumo monster stomps on the ground and sends a shockwave their way. Momo and Olkarun duck behind a building, but Momo still doesn't understand why a spirit like this would be attacking her. Olkarun corrects her and says it isn't actually a spirit because he has read about this thing before, and it turns out that it's an American flatwood alien. But if that thing is really an alien, Momo wonders why the spirit doorbell reacted to it. Olkarun goes on to explain that there are studies that suggest the spirits and aliens have something in common, and as for why the alien is attacking them, is probably here to get revenge for Momo blowing up that spaceship yesterday. And if they don't hurry up and do something about it now, they are eventually going to die from all this poison fog. Momo is the only one with the power to fight back against that thing, but while she's controlling Olkarun's curse, she can't use her powers properly. While thinking, she loses focus on Olkarun for a second and he begins to transform, but there's no time for her to make him turn back because the alien has found them and destroys the building they were hiding in. The two run across the compound to get away, and once they finally get to cover, Momo turns Olkarun back, but his arm still looks cursed, so she has to try harder to get him back to normal. While she does that, Olkarun looks around and sees all the destruction that he has brought to Momo's home. He can no longer let himself stand on the sidelines while Momo does all the heavy lifting, so he tells her that he wants to fight as well. Momo asks how he intends to do that, so he explains that he wants her to release the physical aspect of the curse while keeping his mind in check so he doesn't become Turbo Granny again. Just then, the alien finds them again and blows the building up, so they are forced to run out into the open. And there's nowhere to hide anymore, so the only option they have is to go with Olkarun's plan and use the curse to their advantage. Momo agrees to release the physical part of the curse, but she still doesn't have full control over her powers, so she can't guarantee that this will work. As she is releasing the curse, the alien sends another shockwave their way, but just before Momo gets hit, Olkarun was able to fully transform and carry her to safety. He feels an unimaginable amount of power surging within him. He's got plus 1000 aura and an impeccable jawline, but he's still got no balls, so depression starts setting in. He is in full control of his mind, but being in this form makes him talk funny and becomes sad, which Momo finds really annoying. He's still got to deal with the alien though, so he approaches it and stands there waiting for it to do something. But as the alien tries to squish him, Olkarun is able to dash out of the way and take 5 of the alien's fingers with it. Olkarun's aura is through the roof right now, but as he is having a stare down with the alien, he suddenly collapses and starts spitting up a ton of blood. With Olkarun unable to move, the alien smashes him into the ground and is about to finish him off with a massive stomp. But Momo uses her powers to pull Olkarun out of the way in time. She asks him if he's alright, and he's more or less fine aside from the massive blood loss. But it looks like his body isn't able to handle all the strain that the curse puts on him. On top of that, while he was transformed, he only managed to cut off 5 fingers, so how are they going to defeat something like that? Just then, Momo comes to realize that the alien looks like a sumo wrestler, so it must follow the same rules, and that means if they get it to touch the ground with its hands, and they win. Maybe. There's no guarantee that this will work, but it's their best shot. So Olkarun says he's going to transform one more time. But after this, his body won't be able to go anymore. Momo tells him to aim for the alien's legs, after which she'll use her powers to trip it and make its hands touch the ground. With the details of the plan settled, they both start running towards the alien, and Okaroon dashes ahead to do as much damage as possible as a human bullet. Okaroon's out of juice now, but he has done enough, so Momo uses her powers to pull the alien forward, and as its hand touches the floor, it begins to melt away just like they planned. But then the thing just sprouts a second pair of legs and stands back up before grabbing Momo and slamming her into the wall. With Momo incapacitated, Okaroon starts losing himself to the curse, but before he can fully transform, Momo wakes back up and keeps it in check. Okaroon asks her to release the curse one last time, even if it might kill him, because he needs to stop the alien, but Momo refuses and says she will be stopping the alien by herself. She says that, but then the alien starts pummeling her into the wall, so Okaroon is getting worried that she might not make it out alive. However, while the beating may have hurt, this was all according to Momo's plan, because after all those punches, there's a huge crater in the wall, and it's deep enough to technically come as outside the compound, so she uses her powers to grab Okaroon and flies him towards her along with a talisman. And once Okaroon is safely outside the compound, she places the talisman back in its spot, causing the monster to burst into flames and burn up in a matter of seconds. Once it's all over, the alien is dead and the compound returns to normal, so Momo is insanely relieved. So much so that she forgets to keep Okaroon's curse in check for a second, so he nearly transforms again. She regains focus, and once he's back to normal, Momo notices that Okaroon's hair looks a lot cooler than it did earlier today. Although she thought the mop head was pretty funny. Just then, she starts feeling really dizzy because of all the psychic energy she's been using, so she ends up fainting, and without her awake to keep the curse under control, Okaroon fully transforms and Turbo Granny's in full control of his body. This was the end of episode 2. Subscribe to not miss the next part.